It's so interesting because it is not something that anyone is outside of. Like, I think anyone can come to study gender and think, oh, I recognize that in my daily life, perhaps. Even in my courses, like looking at everyday language, it's like, oh, I've never thought about that in that way before.
So in my field, for example, in Latin American studies, one of the stereotypes associated with Hispanic men is machismo. Of course, machismo is rife, and there's been structures of power throughout the 20th century in particular, based on the remnants of colonialism that have led to very patriarchal organizations of society.
Like, just in the sense that a man is being assertive, but a woman's more being kind of angry, if that makes sense. It's disappointing because it's seen completely differently whether a man does it or a woman does it.
For me, I think it's to do with the fact that gender is really fundamental to how we understand ourselves as humans and how we kind of construct ourselves as humans.
We've built gender as a thing, as a culture and a system, and I think understanding that is the first step to sort of moving beyond it. And I think the more we understand what we have, the more we can sort of work to break it down.
And I think especially people of our generation, you know, it's very different to when even the likes of my parents were brought up or my grandparents. And I think in order to, you know, when we go further on the line, in order to teach our children things, we need to be as educated as we can.
It's not simply an academic exercise. It has to do with policies, with behaviors, with attitudes. So what we do here in our degrees, in our courses, has important consequences.
In our classes, we almost always revolve back around to questions of gender in some shape or form. And I think that is very important in our classes as well, because the constituency of students that study languages skews towards women quite often. And I think that means that we're speaking to experiences that are, you know, very close to our students' own.
Of course, historically, media have reproduce stereotypes and usually reproduce conservative ways of understanding gender. So man as images of force, of ambitiousness, and whereas women were represented with more nurturing roles.
Of course, with the internet, you get all sorts of representations of gender, not all positive, not all negative, but it is very much all the time, always there.
The media constructs gender oftentimes in really narrow and problematic ways. We're seeing lots of changes in that regard. We're seeing lots of movement around kind of diversity, but we're also seeing a backswing. The way in which gender is presented on the media tends to be maybe slightly retrograde.
It's only kind of recently that, you know, women are kind of being brought to the forefront a bit more. You know, we had like Barbie was like a massive like box office hit recently, and that film was all about, you know, what it is to be a woman. And there's so many different things about like being a woman that maybe just isn't appealing to society, and like it's kind of hidden.
You know, coming across a woman's name is kind of rare. Yeah, it's amazing, but it is quite rare. And not only that, there's not a lot of like exposure to, there is more in recent years, but not a lot of exposure in mainstream media to queer filmmakers, to, you know, people that don't identify with any pronouns, to people that identify with they them pronouns. It's very much still, I think, a male-biased industry.
So thinking about the gender gaps in the media industry, the ways in which fewer women, and in particular more mature women, reach a higher position in the newsroom, for example, is crucial and important. And in particular, teaching students who are interested in the film, media or broadcasting industry, this is particularly important to understand.
Representation is everything. I think that once you can see something and you can understand something, the fear of it being the unknown is taken out of it.
I think it's crucial that we always have gender in the back of our minds. I think we live in a society where if you're not male, cis, white, you're not going to have the same chances of succeeding.
For ourselves, studying gender is also crucial because it challenges also our own biases, the way we have learned about gender from society, from the education we receive, but also from our family.
We need to make sure that students come out of our programme as really critical readers of that context, and they cannot do that if they haven't engaged with, in a fulsome way, with what it means to live a gendered, complex, challenging life. They can't do it, they can't engage with that without engaging with those questions.
Maybe it's a bit idealistic. I would love for us to live in a world where, you know, gender or perceptions of gender aren't treated negatively, or like that people's lives aren't negatively impacted on that sort of level. And I think the only way to start with that is to become aware of it, to look at it and see how things can change.
It's up to us and our students here to identify that through studying gender and to change that and to make films about diversity that include people who look slightly different, who have shaved hair, who just don't want to be the same as everybody else and then don't get bullied because they're not the same as everybody else.
By studying gender, we can challenge stereotypes, we can push norms, and also we can advocate for a more equitable society.